Hello, everyone. This is Eric Van Johnson back again this year, also known as Showcome on Twitter. I'm doing interviews for Scale 12X this year, and my first interview here is Ron Evans, aka Dead Program. Um,
Hi,
how's it going, Ron?
it's great. How you doing?
I'm doing good. For those of us who don't know you or know about you, you mind giving us a little background on what you've been up to?
Sure, I am the ringleader of the Hybrid Group. We're a software development consultancy based in Los Angeles, California, home of the flying space robots. If you're a fan of either SpaceX or the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, you know I'm not making this up. It's too amazing to make this up. Uh,
It's
so uh, we do a lot of work with open source software, and since Linux is the operating system of robotics and physical computing, obviously Scale is an important conference to us. And I was very excited to get the opportunity to participate this year in two different ways. One is we're doing a talk on one of our robotics platforms, Cylon.js, which is JavaScript-powered robotics. And then additionally, we are doing a workshop for kids programming for actual kids and programming, not just talking about programming and kids, but actual programming of kids doing programming.
I said, great, you're going to program kids because I got a couple that need some reformatting.
Yeah, well, you can't program your own kids.
We need refactoring.
Says that in the manual somewhere.
All right, well, let's talk about Cylon.js a little bit. I mean, what is that used for? I was checking out the website. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, thank you very much. So, um, it's been possible to develop robotic and physical computing type systems for many years, using homebrew or very hacky kinds of cobbled together solutions, but they were islands of integration. It was very difficult to make one thing talk to another. So, in open source software, what we care about a lot these days is integration of things. So Cylon.js is one of three different open source robotics and physical computing platforms that we have. Some people call it the Internet of Things. That's kind of a long title, but it does describe a little better the typical sort of things that people actually do with this sort of software. Distributed sensor networks that communicate back using the internet to we, the human masters, to make decisions about what needs to be done. And it's not just it's in aspects of the supply chain ranging all the way from manufacturing, what happened to that pallet of parts in the warehouse, to logistics and distribution, where how many pounds of cargo is each one of our trucks carrying and where is it in relation to the rest of the fleet, things like telematics, uh, retail stores that actually alter their experience based on the customers that are in the store at the time. There are many different aspects of where computing in the physical world are now coming into more contact, thinking outside the box in a very literal sense, what happens in the outside world and connecting that together so that it actually can do something useful. So, our company, the Hybrid Group, we have been working for some time on different client projects related to, we're sort of a software company that makes hardware companies look good and or work better. So Cylon.js is one of the three frameworks that we introduced last year. R2 is one of them. It's Ruby on robots. You've got Cylon.js, which is JavaScript robotics powered by Node.js. And then the third, the most recent, GoBot, which is the Go programming language. So JavaScript being the most popular programming language these days, according to our somewhat unscientific Twitter survey that we conduct each year. You can check out the results of this last year's at code2013.net. So we conduct a Twitter survey of what programming languages are most popular among the Twitterati, and this year it was JavaScript. No real surprise. I mean, it is the most native language to the web. And so Cylon.js, really, you could think of it sort of like Ruby on Rails is to web development, like Cylon.js is to robotics development. It's a series of modules that know how to talk to different hardware, and it's very easy to put it all together so you can, control your AR drone with your Leap Motion, or, control your Sphero using your Arduino, or all of the above, as is sometimes the case. So right now, Cylon.js supports, I think, 14 different hardware and software platforms: Arduino, BeagleBone Black, Raspberry Pi, Sphero, AR drone, Crazy Fly, which is another little nano drone used by a lot of experimenters and researchers, OpenCV, which is an open source computer vision library, which is very standard, again used by researchers and in commercial industry. So our mission is to make it as easy to do robotics development as it is to do web development today.
Okay, so are you saying that people interested in robotics is who should be looking at attending your talk, or is it a broader scope than that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, if you're not interested in robotics and physical computing, you really should be. In 5 years, robotics will be like mobile app development is today. There'll be app stores, there'll be platforms, that's where the industry is already moving. We've seen that, on the technology side, it's been happening for a while. For those of us who've been into open source hardware, we've been seeing it. The normal people just figured it out when they heard, wow, Google bought that thermostat company? What's that all about? So the Nest acquisition was very much a wake-up call for normal people that, wow, the internet and my house are starting to talk to each other.
Yeah, cool times. I look forward. I'm always really interested, especially in the home automation things that are out there. The GoBot version. I actually just tweeted about that when I was doing my last minute research on you. I'm probably going to give that a stab here, maybe this weekend. Let's talk a little bit about KidsRuby. This is I love this idea. This is great, very interesting thing you're doing. Now, is the idea that people will bring their children to your talk, or are you just going to kind of lay out, how to teach Ruby to children?
Well, actually, the organizers of Scale are doing a really exciting thing this year, which is on the weekend there's going to be a couple of different workshops for kids. The idea is kids are going to come and actually bring their laptop computers or their parents' laptops, and we're going to actually do programming together. So it's not just for parents to talk about it. That's also cool. There's a whole track going on Saturday, which is young people doing presentations for adults and other young people about programming. And then on Sunday, all day, we're doing workshops. We're doing our KidsRuby workshop. There's another one on Blender that's going to be going on. So it's going to be a series of very interactive, very hands-on, in our case, actually do stuff. Which at the same time, there's going to be sort of a playground. I can't remember what they decided to call it. A free zone where you can actually go in and then, after our workshop or before, go and play around. We're going to be in there afterwards. If you want to continue playing around with some of those same ideas, there's going to be other people in there as well. That way, if you don't have the attention span for a whole workshop, you can come in and just sort of play. And if you want to do the workshop and then afterwards keep working with some of those same ideas, you can just move over to this, free space. So the idea with KidsRuby really started out. KidsRuby is really two things. One is that it's a actual downloadable, single-click installable version of Ruby specifically designed for kids. So many of us who learn to program of a certain generation, we all learned to program on the Apple II or the Commodore 64, the TRS-80, systems like this. You just turned on the computer and there was your basic prompt. So you started typing some code, and there was no 3. Step 3 was you were writing code. That was it. These days, so you want to teach your kid to code. So you're very well intentioned. You go to the Apple Store and you buy a brand new MacBook Pro, with 8 gigs of RAM and an SSD, and you get home. You're like, "Hey kid, here's your brand new computer. Yay, Daddy, I love you. All right, first thing we're gonna do is download Xcode." Dad, what's that mean? We've lost something essential in this pursuit for, greater seamless unibody aluminum designs. And I love Apple. I worked at Apple back in the glorious golden days of Jobs the first. And, the idea with KidsRuby, though, is something, it's a lot simpler. It's a lot easier. You just start running it. There's some code on the left. You click run, and it shows you the output on the right. You really couldn't get much simpler than that. And it's a real Ruby. It's not a fake Ruby or a partial Ruby. I mean, it's an actual Ruby, so that when the kid's ability to program grows from what we supply, and we supply a bunch of curriculum and lessons built into KidsRuby as part of the integrated help. A bunch of that is curriculum that came from Hackety Hack, which is another Ruby programming system created by the disappeared Y the Lucky Stiff. A bunch of it is also curriculum created by a couple of friends of mine as part of the Ruby for Kids project, which was basically around game programming using Gosu, which is another game programming library written largely using Ruby, or it provides Ruby integration anyway. So we included all that curriculum in there. And so you've got Turtle graphics, you've got game programming. Then we also added Sphero, which is the little robotic spherical robot from Robotics, our very good friends and colleagues over there. We work with them very closely at the hybrid group. So one of the things we did was we added, we call it KidsRuby Robot Edition. So you basically, if you've got the Sphero and you've got KidsRuby, you can write some robotic code. So kids programming robots. What could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, Terminator, I don't know.
I always think that Terminator scenario's, overrated. I mean, why would the robots stay here and fight us on this muddy, slimy, they could just go into space where the iridium is in whole asteroids full and solar radiation is plentiful,
Yeah.
Stay here for us? What, just to satisfy our need for the apocalyptic movie ending? I don't think so.
And age range for the KidsRuby, is there a sweet spot there for, what age a kid should be there?
Well, we found that, it's linguistic programming, it's textual programming, so you do need to be able to type. There are other great programming avenues available for those who are even younger, things like Scratch or even Scratch Junior. So for KidsRuby, older elementary or middle school is really the sweet spot.
Okay.
It's Ruby, so it's a lot easier than other programming languages to learn. I mean, I love many languages. I love many fighting styles, But I thought when I first got serious about trying to teach kids programming, I actually thought Python would be better. I was quite wrong. Turns out Python's not at all good to teach kids programming, which is surprising because Python's a great language and it has a lot of really great stuff for learning programming, like Pygame. So you would think that it would actually be ideal. It turns out, though, that the thing that makes Python cool as a language, which is whitespace, is incredibly difficult to explain to non-programmers, the idea of significant whitespace. So JavaScript, switching over, you would think that would be a great first language. It's built into everybody's browser. But it's got a few idiosyncrasies, especially when it comes to punctuation, which, since the idea of punctuation as applied to computer languages is a little clumsy, they're still trying to figure out where is it comma space or space comma? How do you work that exactly? So punctuation is a little tricky. So it turns out that Ruby is actually kind of the ideal first language for these kids as a textual language. because you can kind of get the ideas across without messing around a lot with the syntax. And so, we've had kids as young as 6 years old. I mean, there's a video on YouTube somewhere of a 5-year-old girl. First of all, a girl who's smarter than a boy by definition, at a younger age, more developmentally advanced. That would be the more correct way to say that. But that, obviously, she's very unusual. We've had the keynote address at the Ruby conference in Miami last November. One of the keynote speeches was actually given by an 11-year-old programmer, Katie Haggerty, and her talk was called "My KidsRuby Journey." So, she's been actually programming in Ruby for a couple of years just to basically show her brother who's boss. And so, again, these are kind of outliers among those kids who are really excited. I mean, and we're not trying to create a generation where everybody's a programmer. I mean, I think that would be nice, but that's not really why we're doing it. We're really doing it to try to teach the underlying concepts of programming to as many people as possible as a way of teaching them to think more abstractly and as a carrier for other ideas, the same way that Seymour Papert really envisioned teaching kids programming. Not a thing of itself, like, oh, learn to programming because that's just like the magic bullet to all that ails the world, but more learn to program because now you can focus your mind on the more difficult ideas and problem solving, which is what we're doing it for in the first place.
Exactly. That's always been my thing, is everybody should learn to program, because even if you don't want to be a programmer, it teaches you how to approach issues and how to think through problems. I think every kid, it should be a mandatory class, just like English and math. Everybody should have to do some sort of programming. But okay, don't want to take up too much more of your time. I appreciate all the time you have given us. Anything else you want to touch on or pitch before I let you go?
I just want to thank the organizers of Scale for doing a great job of organizing really 2 days of activities related to young programmers. I think that's really fantastic. We need to do a lot more. And I really encourage people, bring your kids and bring your laptop. And, if you don't have any kids, just show up and help. We love volunteers, and it's there's really nothing more exciting and satisfying than seeing that spark of excitement in the young programmer, that same spark that each of us felt at some point in our programming journey. And it's incredibly satisfying and exciting to see that again, and you might remember things about programming that you love about it that you've forgotten. So
yeah, I definitely feel you. I have 2 daughters, and my one daughter is getting into programming, and she's starting to accomplish things, doing little programs and little images. And I love to see her excitement when she's able to figure something out, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that the first time I was able to do something. That was fantastic.
Exactly. 2 years, she'll be like, Daddy, why is there a semicolon there? You're like, quiet, kid, go do your homework.
No. In 2 years, I'll be going to her saying, "Hun, how do you do this again? Because I need to figure this out." the rate at what they learn.
Have you finished that coding yet? Because
that's it.
Daddy's got to eat.
I'm going to outsource to her. That's exactly right. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. What the organizers of Scale, they blow me away. What a great job they do. Just in general, how big Scale has gotten over the years. I go up there. I've been going up there for a few years now, and every year I'm just amazed with just how many people are there. How big it's gotten. Just great tracks everywhere. It doesn't really matter what you're interested in. There's going to be a track for you or some talks for you, and you can't beat the price. I mean, it's got to be one of the cheapest conferences out there. Again, that's Scale 12X. It's February 21st through the 23rd. It's going to be at the Hilton Los Angeles Airport. Hope to see everybody there. Ron, I know you'll be there. I'll try to hunt you down and shake your hand.
Well, likewise, Eric. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you at scale.
All right, thanks again, Ron.
All right, take care.